Write a whole book. Yeah, write a book. Oh, thank you. Do you have a copy in your hand? Great, great. Hi, everyone. Oh, wait, we gotta Oh, I'm gonna print a dehumidifier.
Oh, smart.
Pre-show answer.
Without Darcy.
T-shirts?
Yes, Carly,
No, I don't need this one. I have.
All right. Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Welcome to One More Page Books. We are so excited for you all to be here. My name is Rebecca.
My name is Lelia.
And we are not the
We did not write this book.
We did not write this book. We're so happy that you all are able to come out to celebrate the launch of Accomplished with us. And I will let Lelia introduce.
I wrote some notes down because I knew I would forget, which is impossible because Amanda is unforgettable. Yeah, that's inside. That's the reason we're all here. Amanda Quain, everybody. We'll get to the main course. We'll pause later. Amanda Quain is an indie bookseller. She's been with One More Page since 2015. I had to look that up because I was like, how long has it been? Longer than I thought. And she's also a playwright, an actor, a marathon runner. Yeah, exactly. A junior angler big fish champion, a boulderer, a big red marching band flautist. I hope that's the appropriate terminology.
Yes.
Thank you. A Vindy Award-winning social media director and an incredible friend. And she lives in Pittsburgh. Her husband.
Yay!
And Jenny, the cat. Obviously, we love her, and we're so excited that Accomplished that she wrote is now out. So, without further ado, Amanda Quain. Welcome. Thank you. Yes, good luck.
No, it rotates. It rotates. I got her.
Spin.
Okay, this is thank you so much, the Fugits, for making me this wonderful hat. Oh my God, baby. Yes, put your costumes up on the seat for a second. And you take it off so people behind you can still see. Oh my God. We'll take a full group picture afterwards.
Yes.
But thank you all so much for coming. This is amazing, and I'm gonna definitely not cry. So.
No one would expect you to do that.
Chill, regular night.
So we're gonna start with a little excerpt from the book that we will read.
Surprise.
No spoilers. Yes, what a surprise. It's from the beginning, so if you have not read the book, don't worry, that's okay. And if you'd like to follow along, you may do so with your copy on page 4.
Yeah, we're gonna go around the room and everyone's gonna read one paragraph.
Be ready.
Is there any context that we need? Any sort of pre-information?
Probably.
Yeah.
Amanda's gonna read the narrator and
Georgie. Yes, so New York, so Accomplished. Take off the stickers, it's awesome. This is mine. Accomplished is a contemporary retelling of Pride and Prejudice from the perspective of Georgiana Darcy, Mr. Darcy's little sister. If you don't know what that means, it's fine. I wrote the book, so you should still be able to read it and enjoy it. Whether you have read Pride and Prejudice or not. My mom can attest to that. She did not read Pride and Prejudice. Sorry to call you out, Mom, but you still love the book.
Yes.
So, yeah, 5 out of 5 moms agree. So we're going to do a little reading from the beginning. So Georgie, who is our main character, is 16 and is at Pemberley Academy boarding school, and she is going out to a diner, Townsend's Diner, which I named after the Townsend Bar at Cafe Kindred, where I wrote most of this book. Shout out to Cafe Kindred, we love them. And they're going to definitely not be pulled off by her big brother Fist. It's going to be like a super fun, casual family gathering.
Absolutely. No stakes or family baggage.
No, not at all.
Rebecca will be performing Fitz.
Yes.
As it's a reference.
As this ancient custom.
And I will be Jen the waitress.
We pulled into the parking lot of Townsend's, a diner that Fitz, of course, had discovered when he was at Pemberley. We'd driven here together at least once a month my freshman year, his senior, when he'd pull himself away from the demands of applying to all the world's top colleges and leading the debate team to victory to hang out with little old me. We'd ordered bottomless pancakes, even though the diner had threatened to take them off the menu after one specifically epic eating extravaganza the day before spring break. For a couple extra bucks, they'd put a whipped cream and M&Ms on them too. Fitz's laugh would be more than an edge to an admonishment, and I'd be glad to hang out with my brother, the only family I had left. It wasn't the sort of place our parents had taught us to visit, with its absence of cloth napkins and a sommelier, but since my dad passed away 4 years ago, when I was 12, and my mom had taken the opportunity to abandon me and my brother to the staff and to each other, it wasn't like there was anyone to stop us. Now I just had Fitz to stop me.
No way.
Perfect. The squeals of the hostess echoed through the relatively empty diner as we pushed through the door, the warmth of the overactive heater inside a welcome reprieve from the biting cold.
Tell me that's not Fitz, Darcy.
Jen.
I got chills. Fitz raised up his mouth in what might be called a smile had his eyes gotten involved. There it is. Squeals were basically standard when grown-ups around Pemberley saw Fitz. If the teachers, support staff, and local townspeople could have voted for Homecoming King, it would have been him every time. I mean, it wasn't, because the Homecoming Corps was a teenage popularity contest, and actual human popularity among our peers was not something that either of us had ever excelled at. Fitz was more the valedictorian type, while I was neither of those things. But still.
What are you even doing here?
I have something mentioned on Jen's backstory.
The same as James' face.
Jen led us to our table way more slowly than I would have liked, my stomach already growling.
Has the semester started for Caltech, or do you geniuses out there need less time in class than everyone else?
I'm at SUNY Meriton this year, actually.
The remnants of Fitz's smile disappeared as we settled into the torn vinyl booth at the back of the diner, where the smell of griddled foods threatened to overwhelm me.
I transferred to be closer to home.
Why would you? Oh.
Jen's face flashed with recognition I needed to get used to as she looked over at me, and I wanted to melt into the vinyl, become one with the vinyl. Since I was pretty sure vinyl booths never had to feel guilty about a single mistake they had made over and over again for the rest of their lives. Plus, they got to live next to the pancakes. And kids dropped food into the cracks of the seating all the time. It would be a less humiliating life than the one I currently led.
Right.
The Pemberley Academy gossip mill churned hard and fast. It had been all over the school within hours when Brian Charlford's dad, a state senator, had gotten caught taking his mistress on a Canadian joyride. The GroupMe's had lit up when Andrea Smithing paid one of the townies to take the SAT for her, and she'd gotten kicked out. So when I, Georgiana Darcy, heiress to the Darcy Empire, little sister of Golden Boy Fitz Darcy, got caught up in a drug scandal at the end of sophomore year, yet managed to avoid expulsion simply on the basis of my family name, people found out pretty quickly. My fingers twitched, and I willed myself not to curl them into fists. Darcy's didn't shake when they were upset.
Our usual order, Jen. Thanks.
Fitz's hands gripped onto the plastic menu, white around the knuckles, beautiful.
And add an orange juice for my sister.
I just brushed my teeth, I said, as Jen took the menus and fled the scene as fast as she could, obviously grateful to avoid Darcy drama. You don't need to order for me.
I know the way you eat when I'm not around, Georgie.
He pulled out his phone to fire off a quick text. Nice. Then turned his undivided attention back to me.
The vitamins in that juice might be the only ones you get all week.
Funny. I rolled my eyes. Fitz was just 3 years older than me. Not old enough to act with my dad, and yet I squirmed under his gaze. Intimately aware of the oncoming conversation that I had no way of avoiding. Sure enough, Fitz leaned forward on his forearms across the table, fingers intertwined. No elbows involved, naturally. My brother might be in a trash diner eating trash pancakes, but he was still Darcy, and he never forgot it. Never let me forget it.
Was raised in a bar.
I know.
Sorry.
It's a nice bar.
Yeah, right. Have you heard from him?
Actually, no. I hadn't expected the conversation to go to him that quickly this early in the morning. My stomach churned unpleasantly. Obviously not. Jen returned with our drinks. Oh. A huge mug of coffee for Fitz and a Diet Coke for me. The small glass of orange juice she set down next to it was accompanied by an apologetic smile as she backed away. He doesn't have my number anymore. Fitz had gotten me a new number in the weeks following the incident, once he pulled me out of school. It was a real boon to my already non-existent social life.
He hasn't tried to email you?
Fitz continued to press as I blew bubbles in my Diet Coke, which I knew would annoy him. The soda annoyed him enough.
Or slide into your DMs or something?
I grimaced. No, Fitz, Wickham hasn't tried to slide into my DMs. It's barely a lie, just rearranging of the truth. And I hadn't even read his emails, which had all poured into my phone when Fitz briefly reinstated my internet privileges over the summer. Hadn't read them that much anyway. More than once. Fine twice.
Beanpole.
Don't call me that. He's taken the nickname up after Dad died in some sort of weird for then 16-year-old paternal instinct. What did you want this to be, Fitz? A super fun breakfast where I tell you that, hey, it doesn't matter that I got pulled out of school 2 weeks before the semester ended last year, but I had no way to contact anyone the entire summer, so I couldn't even try to explain my side of the story, and now the entire student body hates me?
If you hadn't gotten mixed up with a drug dealer.
I didn't know he was a drug dealer.
Pancakes!
Jen's voice, a trilled out sing-song, beautiful, cut through a fight that was quickly turning vicious. Before I got to add, and you're the one who wanted us to be friends. Fitz and I both leaned back. My brother straightened me the collar of his button down. I didn't bother to try and adjust the wrinkles in my tie-dyed Camp Sanders and t-shirts.
You two know the drill. No new plays until this one is finished. Are we trying to break any records today?
The world is wide and full of possibilities, Jen. I kept my gaze on my brother as I spoke, his eyes smoking with anger. Let's not rule anything out.
Jen about pancakes. I'm like, wow, yeah. Tell them like it is. Thank you for letting us jump in that way.
Thank you.
And
It's beautiful.
for letting me be a part of the performance of this.
You were the ideal Jen. I'm actually going to call my audiobook
Thank you.
narrator, who's amazing. And she did such a good job as Jen, but I think you might at least top
I didn't listen because I didn't want it to color.
Sure. No, you can tell this was fresh.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Like the art student. Sorry.
It's on the first question already. You're such a professional. We were going to ask you to give your elevator pitch.
You did it.
I've done one of two of these before.
Yeah.
I know, but I'll do it again. Accomplished, as we said, is about Georgiana Darcy, who you all met just then. She is a Darcy, which means that she has a lot of responsibility and a lot of privilege, and also does not have a great way of moving through the world. She's not really good at it. And she's coming back from what she calls the incident, capital T, capital I, it's very important, with Wickham Foster, who, if you've read Pride and Prejudice, you remember Wickham, of course, her year before, and she's trying to basically reclaim her place at Pemberley Academy. And she comes with a very definitive plan. She's like, I can fix things with logic, which always goes well in young adult novels. She's like, I will make everyone love me. I will make the school love me. I will make my brother love me. It'll be very easy, and I will accomplish it quickly.
Of course.
So ambitious.
Yes.
Also, you can see the full plan on the backs of some of our shirts.
Yes, here, we can read it out loud if you want. Georgie Darcy's guide to rebuilding her extremely broken reputation, making actual friends, and proving once and for all that she deserves to carry on the Darcy name, no matter what Aunt Catherine said in the family newsletter.
Yeah, Aunt Catherine.
Yeah. So that's accomplished, and it's a romance, and it's a sibling story, and it's about my feelings I had when I saw the Jonas Brothers get back together. So that's pretty much all of that. Yeah. What word do you
Very
need?
right, also, which I'm sure you all know because you probably all know Amanda, so you're aware that she is.
These are just my fans.
So moving past the elevator pitch, and now I realize that Lelia wrote this question, and it's going to be weird that I asked this question. But so much of the accomplished origin story is linked to your own various origin stories. You have your own marching
superpowers.
Your superpowers, yes. The spider that bit you that one time.
The Regency spider.
Yeah.
So
So you have obviously a lot of marching band experiences that I would imagine you've talked about, sort of the upstate New York feelings that you've packed into this book.
Yes.
But it is also not your first Austen adaptation.
No, Rebecca, how did you know?
I don't know. Lelia wrote this question. So Lelia says, let's start at the beginning. Tell us about Hey Darcy.
Rebecca, I would love to tell you specifically.
Great, thank you. Thank you.
So that you asked.
Yeah, so Jane Austen has always been a thing that's very important to me. I read Pride and Prejudice for the first time, and I was probably like 13 or 14. One of my family members, dear friends, Mr. Michael, gave me a full set of the Dover thrift editions of all the Jane Austen books, which is like a really good first edition of Jane Austen, because they're so cheap and so floppy, and they feel very satisfying. And so I read Pride and Prejudice and loved it. And I remember the next year, my sophomore year in high school, I did it for a term paper, and I felt very proud of myself. I'm like, Pride and Prejudice is a feminist piece.
Oh, look at you.
Yeah, no one's ever said this before. Plus, that was around 2005, which is when the Keira Knightley everybody. It's my book event.
It's your day.
It's my day.
Reply to the Instagram post that I tagged him in.
Exactly. I think Colin Firth shines best in Mamma Mia. I really do. But so I've been involved in Jane Austen and loved that. And then sort of when I was in college and I was doing more playwriting, I got on a very adaptation-heavy path. So I would do I did a lot of theater. So I would like do a play, get really attached to the very small part I had, and then write like a full-length piece about it, which is also a good way to guarantee you have a job, which is nice. I was like, Peter Quince the Mechanicals. What's his 2.5-hour long story?
What's his 5-act drama?
Right, exactly. So I was like deep in adaptation mode, and I loved Jane Austen, and then it kind of came down to this weird thing that Rebecca and I did, because Rebecca and I are kind of buds, as you might have guessed. And we both work here. I know it's wild.
Shocking.
We both work here at the bookstore together, and we like often just get into these weird like riffs where we just like start a bit and keep going for way longer than anyone wants us to. And I don't even remember really how it started, but we got into this weird bit where I was Bingley, who is in Pride and Prejudice, Darcy, the sort of main hero's like affable golden retriever boy best friend. And it was just me like being like the clown and trying to get Darcy,
The straight man.
to just like go bowling and like have weird
I
adventures.
remember it was bowling.
Bowling was definitely one of them. It was like and I started doing this weird clap thing where he would like
Well, it was
chant.
because I think you were like, hey Darcy, hey Darcy,
Yes.
hey Darcy.
So I
And
started
my
doing like,
brain,
hey Darcy.
but my brain went to, hey Mickey, you're so fine, you're so cool, oh my god, that's where my brain
And
went.
so we started doing this weird long chants where she would just be the straight man as long as possible, and I would just chant at her for as long as I could and be like, hey Darcy, let's go bowling. Score a lot of points, get some chicken wings. Like just for like 10 to 15 minutes at a
You
time.
missed my birthday.
Yeah, that was fun. And then we eventually realized that I was like, well, if we're going to spend all of our time doing this, we should try to make some like art out of it.
Yeah.
So we wrote Hey Darcy, a romantic comedy, which was a play that we produced in 2019. So long ago, where I played Bingley and Rebecca played Darcy, and we went on like their grand tour of Europe when they were 18 and just like being like dirtbag 18-year-old boys around the continent. And so I was just like very much in the mindset. And even though like I was playing Bingley, we both wrote both of it, and Darcy was the one who really had the emotional journey through the show. Bingley has one too, but Darcy's is the bigger through point. We accidentally handed the pitch to Rebecca, where we didn't take her off stage for a single scene.
Nope.
So
was so tired.
yeah, it was very tiring. But I just in Darcy's head a lot because of that, and like really like digging into why, because we see so much about Lizzie Bennet, right? Because she's the main heroine in the book, and a lot of the adaptations focus on her, which is very reasonable. We love Lizzie, but Darcy's such a specific type of person. Like, he's very rigid in his ways. Like, his pride is very important to him. He has this, from the book. He's got this, like, very specific way of approaching the world, and I was really interested in how he became that way. And then it sort of became into, like, okay, well, he also has this sister. Like, how did she become that way? And then at the same time, the Jonas Brothers got back together.
I remember it.
And that was, it all comes together. And I was very important to me, obviously. Joe Bros for life. And I watched this documentary about them. And in the documentary, it was like about how they had gotten back together and like how they found their way back to each other. Because when they broke up, this is a brief history of the Jonas Brothers. When they broke up, it was because like their relationship as siblings had fallen apart. That was like why they had to break up the band. And so the documentary is about how like they found their way to each other again. And I specifically was struck by Joe, the middleest Jonas brother, the funny one. He was Nick's the hot one. We'll do this later. But like, whenever they would be like in an interview or like doing photos, doing music videos, like Joe would always have his arm around one of his brothers, and it just looked like he loved them so much, and you could just tell how much he missed them. And so then that kind of got me thinking about like sibling breakups almost. And what better case is there for siblings having trauma than the Darcys, who had this huge situation happen to them before the events of Pride and Prejudice that we never talk about, because Georgie has no lines in the original Pride and Prejudice. We see her like twice, and she just shows up and it's like, she was very pretty and very nice, and she loved her brother very much.
I heard you can play the piano.
Yeah, she plays the piano forte, and she's very accomplished. And this terrible thing happened to her with Wickham, because in the original book, she's like almost elopes at like age 14 with this terrible man who almost ruins her. And it just never struck me as very accurate that you would be fine after that. Like, I was 14, and I fell apart over much lower things than that as a person. Like, I was never abducted by a man, and I still was very sad all the time. So that was like, I can handle a little better than.
My timeline
not the same.
Yeah.
So then I just kind of got into this headspace and was just like, what is their relationship? What is their story? And what is their chance? And then, but it's ended up being an 80,000 word novel instead of like a fun rhyme.
I kept writing words.
Yeah, just kept happening.
Some of them don't rhyme. Don't worry about it. It's fine.
Some of them do rhyme. Don't worry about that.
Yeah, the sibling like relationship really is such like the beating heart of the book.
Yeah.
Even though it is very much, as you can see, it is Georgie's book, which is great.
But it really is
talk
about
it all.
it is about the relationship between her and Fitz and
Yeah.
like their journey and how they both realize the wrongs they've done to each other.
And the shared trauma that they
Right.
just need to like
Terrible.
the rest of it.
Terrible things happen to them. It makes sense that they're going through all of this, but they like decided they both need to be strong for the other one instead of helping each other. And so the book is sort of their journey to realize like you can help the people you love while still allowing yourself to be open to them. It's funny also. It's so funny.
So funny, you guys.
So funny. There's
I mean,
missing.
Jen was great, right?
Jen was great.
We all love Jen.
Yeah, shout out to Jen Lawrence, one of our ideal customers. I took the spelling of her name for Jen in the book. So.
She is as iconic as this Jen. So yeah, I mean, you talked a little bit about like this isn't your first writing endeavor.
Sure.
Like you wrote plays and you wrote other genres before you wrote this
I did.
contemporary young adult
Listen,
novel.
everyone's written a dystopian and put through it.
That's right. Yeah. So what's been that journey, and what are the different paths that? Sorry, I wrote this question, and now me 2 days later is like, this is a garbage question. What? I'm trying to make it better.
Well, this was my question.
Oh,
but thanks.
thanks.
Is the question what's my path?
No, it was how has the different genres helped
Okay.
or like been a problem with writing contemporary?
Oh, see, I did miss a word.
Okay,
Oh,
so
that's
it's been interesting because I had always written speculative fiction. Like the books that we tried to sell before this, which I'm glad we sold this one first, but I think this is better. But I had a dystopian, I had like a contemporary fantasy. I will say all of my books have always been very much grounded in a contemporary voice. Like the contemporary fantasy, obviously, it's like people from our world who have to fight a dragon. I am also shout out to Dustin who wanted me to have a dragon in my book. I'm sorry there's not one in here. You can blame me.
Book 2, baby.
But yeah, book 2. I'm gonna get a dragon in there.
the dragons are a metaphor.
But so I was always writing this contemporary voice, and although I've read a ton of like fantasy, and plus I started writing with the intent of publication like 2014, which was like fantasy, dystopian, like it was still the boom. They weren't buying it anymore, but it was still all coming out, and like it had been published for the few years before that. But I look at what I read like as a kid, like I just like was basically inhaling Mencavet at a rate unhealthy for the human body. And like reading like the Alice books and like all these like Babysitter's Club, Sweet Valley, how like contemporary series where you're living in these contemporary worlds. And so I think actually like it was less that I came to a new thing here and more that I finally found what I should have been pretty much the whole time through this.
And you wrote a lot faster, right? Than like your.
I wrote this first draft in 6 weeks.
I'm not a writer, but that seems fast.
It was fast. I did my greatest accomplishment from that was that on one day when we were doing Novatine, our book festival that we do here sometimes, I wrote 10,000 words in one day, and then I went to like a mixer, and Libba Bray was there. Like 5 of you will know who that is, but the 5 of you who do, she's yes, we love her. She's a huge literary star, and I like mentioned that to her. She's like, you wrote 10,000 words today, and then she bought me a drink.
Amazing.
Yes, Libba. Appropriate response.
What a queen.
You need a drink if you wrote 10,000 words.
Right.
Also, cheers to you.
Yeah.
And so you mentioned that Georgiana does not have any lines in Pride and Prejudice,
Yeah.
which I didn't really pick up when I read.
Because
Pride
the
and Prejudice.
adaptations always make her bigger.
Are
than
always
she is,
like,
too.
oh brother,
Yeah.
she's lovely, whatever.
My brother talks about you all the time.
All the time. And so, did that kind of, dearth of source material give you a freedom that you could sort of create this any Georgia you wanted, or was it more limiting because there wasn't that much to go on in the adaptation?
I definitely felt it was more of a freedom. I think the characters I was more nervous about adapting were the ones who have like very beloved, iconic. Like I was nervous about writing Lizzie. She's not in this a lot because we're sort of seeing like Pride and Prejudice happening in the background of this book, but she's still there, and that was more of a nerve-wracking experience because people love Georgiana, but not in the same way that they love characters who are like the Pride and Prejudice characters. So Georgiana, and I do
No one
think
says I'm a Georgiana.
like
They do great.
yeah.
If they do great,
She's not the first card you pick and marry Mr. Darcy, I get it. But so it allowed me to have a little more fun and explore the idea of like what a female version of Darcy is, because also a lot of things we see in Mr. Darcy are things that if he had been a woman would not have been particularly beloved. And in their defense, he's not initially beloved in the book as a guy either, but like, but he's like a swoon-worthy like international superstar of a hero, and you don't see that same type of hero as a woman very much. And so I wanted to see like, hey, like who is this like stubborn, anxious, like closed off, like broken person as a girl? Like what does the teenage girl version of that look like? And I do think that when we do occasionally match up with what's happening in Pride and Prejudice, we do meet up with like the traditional Georgiana scenes. At that point, she wants so desperately to impress Lizzie that you still see the Georgiana you see in the book. It's not like I'm contradicting what book Georgiana is. You're just seeing like the iceberg of like, it's like this is fun Georgiana, and this is the trauma.
Exactly, because like it's like you are kind of understanding more of like, oh yes, like she would act exactly that way in the book, but now you see exactly why.
Yeah.
Like, oh, because she really needs to like
She's trying to
prove
be
that she's that she can be a Darcy. Which the Darcy name is like its own character in this book, which you normally, I mean, like didn't occur to me when I read Pride and Prejudice or watched it, because you're seeing it more from the bedside.
Right.
So that was kind of cool to get to explore the Darcy dynamic. So you put your own spin on a lot of the original characters, which is pressure, but also like kind of fun. Did you like was there a most fun one to write of the original?
So this is the Charlie Bingley question, right?
Oh yeah.
I didn't say it.
I will say, I'll talk about Charlie in a minute. I always say Charlie for this question. I do want to say how much I love writing Fitz. Getting into like what a modern version of Mr. Darcy was fascinating. And I think my version of him is one of the things I'm most proud of in the book. It was harder, but I really love translating it into a modern thing. But the real answer to your question, of course, is Charlie Bingley. Charlie Bingley, as we discussed earlier, is like the golden retriever, like affable best friend of Mr. Darcy. He's rich, but not as rich. He's handsome, but not as handsome.
But he's fine with that.
He's so happy. So in my version, I made him like a himbo frat boy. Because why wouldn't you want that out of your Mr. Bingley? So yeah, Charlie Bingley like shows up at a frat party that Georgie and her friend Avery have snuck into. And he's just like, oh my god, Georgie! And he calls Fitz Fitzy, which I just love. It's such a like small detail. I'm like, yes, that's it. And he's like, it's an autumnal colors themed party. And he's wearing just like shorts and no shirt. He has 2 autumn leaves, just like hanging out. But it's just like so down to help Georgie with her. She's supporting like a matchmaking plan. And he's like, I will do anything you ask me. I love all Darcys. Your brother's my best friend in the entire world, and I love you now too. And he's such a delight, and I love him so much.
He's such a good contrast too. I mean, like, and that's the thing is, it's like he only gets to be like so funny and bubbly because the Darcys are so like
reserved.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, the Darcys are still funny. Like,
but they're a very different type of fun.
Yes, but
like,
he gets to just be, like you said, golden retriever himbo.
Yeah. Charlie Bingley is a CW character.
Funny CW show, not like One Tree Hill where they're all just like.
No, he's like he's like Cappy. Is that his name?
That like is an ABC Family show, but yes, Cappy. And Rich, I can't believe you knew that.
I thought Rick was on CW.
I also thought Rick was on CW.
You would think, but I'm glad you all asked him.
But yeah, so Charlie Bingley was definitely one of the most fun. I also loved getting to dig into Lydia Bennet, who was not originally in this because I was very worried about touching Lydia, because I do think that for those of you who've seen the Lizzie Bennet Diaries, it's an amazing adaptation, and Mary Kate Wiles, who plays Lydia in that, I think her performance is just so perfect, and the arc they wrote for Lydia in that is so perfect that I was like afraid to touch Lydia because I didn't want to make her like a caricature. But my editor convinced me that we needed to have Lydia in here.
Great job.
She's here, but I won't tell you where. And she's like,
It's like a
have to have
Spartacus
Lydia,
thing.
right? Because Wickham is such an important part of this book, and Lydia and Wickham are like irrevocably tied, and so we ended up giving Lydia a scene where she is takes Georgie and Fitz into a super target for the first time, which for like 2 people who have only been at like the best boutiques in the world, to go to a super Target on the side of the road in upstate New York at midnight is a very weird experience. And to have Lydia Bennet being your tour guide there is a wild time.
Your guide through the inferno.
Yeah, she is. Who is Dante's guide?
Beatrice.
She's Beatrice taking them through the layers of hell.
We should call Anna. Are you watching?
Yeah. But yeah, so that was also very fun. Adaptation is such a delight. It's just fan fiction, but since the IP is expired, I can get paid $4
from the original that you wanted to fit in that you couldn't? Or did you sort of get everyone that you wanted?
I will.
The A-team.
I mean, I got the A-team in. Obviously, there's a lot more Bennetts that we don't see. In an ideal world, there'd be more of them, but we kind of reduce it to like, there's a lot of unnamed sisters in the background, but we only meet Lizzie, Jane, and Lydia. The big three.
Yeah.
I did sneak Mr. Collins in very briefly. When you guys read it, if you care about Mr. Collins, he
Bold move.
the Venn diagram of those is nothing, but he's a brief cameo. Yeah, it's a brief cameo as one of Fitz's TAs. I just like,
oh my god, that's right.
Yeah.
It's been so long since I've read it.
Because Georgie writes a very like pompous sounding letter to the TA in like a very Collinsy voice, and he just signs it Shore C, which is like the most TA movie you could possibly pull. So he was my little sneak in of like a really fun character that would have been fun to write, but just like did not fit into the world of this at all.
Yeah.
I appreciate the restraint that you didn't just straight up put in a boiled potato salad. Like, I know that would have been inappropriate, and your editor would have been like, no. But
I don't know if she would have been like, no. No, but I did put, the other thing I snuck in here is I do, for those of you who are fans of the 2005 Pride and Prejudice, I'm sorry for the back of the room there, who hated that. I did put the famous hand flex Darcy gif in the book. I just assumed that the hand flex is genetic.
Yes.
So we do have the hand flex in there.
That's a good point. That hadn't occurred to me, but it makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
Jeans. That's the hand flex, yeah. Okay, so a character that was not in the original at all, that you got to just make up from scratch, was Avery.
My boy.
What was it? Were you just like, wow, a new character, I can do whatever I want?
It kind of, I mean, part of it's funny talking about questions about like drafting this book, because since I did draft it so fast. And I did plot it out. My agent always makes fun of me because I hated plotting. I was like, if I tell myself the story first, then why am I writing? This is stupid. Like, if I know how it ends, what am I doing here? And this was the first book I ever plotted, and we wrote it in 6 weeks, and then we sold it, and et cetera, et cetera. So I'm sorry for doubting you, though, if you're watching this.
I'm gonna give my humble tea.
Yeah, I get it. Drafting is good. So, like, Avery was in the draft. I don't know, like, Georgie has all this terrible wicked stuff. She deserves a nice boy who just loves her. Well, he likes her. We don't know that he loves her, but I know.
Canon.
Yeah.
It's canon.
Yeah, like I was also very much inspired in this book overall by two of my favorite movies / like IPs, Clueless, and Legally Blonde, specifically Legally Blonde the musical, specifically starring Christian Borle as Emma Forrest. And in both of those like productions are about women who are very well off, moving through the world, and realizing that they sometimes need to adjust the way they move through the world. They don't have to change themselves, because who they are is already perfect, but they need to be more aware of how the world around them, like, how they interact with the world around them. And they both have these, like, just nice young man. I mean, Paul Rudd. Who doesn't want Paul Rudd in their life at any point? And Christian Borle, who played Evan in Legally Blonde the musical, they're just like, they're nice guys who attach themselves to these complicated women and love them unconditionally. And I wanted that for Georgie. Like, I have a very good love interest in my life. I'm not gonna say anything more than that, so I'll cry so much. I have a nice boy. Yes, I have a nice boy who loves me unconditionally, even when I'm, this.
Beautiful flowers.
Yes, exactly. So I wanted Georgiana to have that too. Like, I didn't want this to just be about exploring her trauma. Like, I wanted it, and also my favorite like YA books growing up. Like, I love a romance. Yeah.
And it's also always like, I mean, not always. I think now it is less so, but like for so long it was always like, yes, the complicated, tortured male hero, and then
which we still love.
Listen, don't get me wrong. I do love that. But, it's always nice, I think, to
I love a nice boy. I love a Paul Rudd. And Avery is my YA Paul Rudd in this case.
He does have Paul Ruddy vibes. Now that you said that.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I see it, right?
Yeah. And so this question, actually Lily wrote, but I was going to write something very similar. So, but it's something that we talked about when we were doing Darcy, and also I think during this when we were writing it a little bit, that, Jane Austen's novels, they deal a lot with wealth, class, and privilege, and all of that stuff. And translating that to a modern story, the Darcy family is obviously very, very wealthy. Wildly wealthy, and they're not always great at navigating social situations.
Right.
with their own privilege.
Right.
And, did you set out to have Georgie reckon with that, with her own privilege and her family's wealth, or was that part of that natural progression of her journey?
I think it was maybe more the natural progression. I didn't sit down and be like, I'm going to write a story exploring the wealth of Georgiana Darcy.
Yeah.
Because I was going into this exploring like what is her personal journey. But when you kind of get into it, like so much of her, like again, like when you look at Clueless, when you look at Legally Blonde, like the way that the Darcys move through the world is very influenced by their wealth and very influenced by the fact that they have so many problems. And none of the fact that she has this wealth discounts the many problems she goes through. But it makes other problems in her life easier. In ways that some of her other classmates, some of the other people in the book, don't get to experience that extra level of comfort and safety that, sort of their privilege provides. And so I felt like as she was learning more about how the world sees her, like part of that has to be about her privilege. And so I would say it's not like, it's not a huge feature of the book, but it was important to me that they talked about it and like sat down and was like, hey, like we're rich. Like I think she literally says like, we're rich, is that bad? Like, and it's like, well, it's not bad, but you have to be aware of it and you have to move through the world. Like I love just like a straight up rich, Gossip Girl style, like why as much as the next girl.
Yeah.
But I think there are also points where you have to examine like what parts of that need to be reckoned with,
Because it's such a part of Pride and Prejudice, too.
It really, the reason Pride and Prejudice translates so well to various different cultures is because of those class dynamics. Like, that's why Fire Island, shout out, works so well because they translate the class dynamics of wealth into the class dynamics of sexuality. And, like, Pride and Prejudice in Pakistan is, Unmarriageable is an amazing book that has the same class dynamics attached to it. So, like, when you take away the sort of, the stratification is that what I'm looking for?
Yeah.
Of different people in the novel, you lose a lot of the nuance. And so I thought that was really important to keep in as well. Plus, fancy boarding schools.
The boarding school itself. As someone who never went to boarding school, but finds stories that are endlessly
I've
fascinating.
read many novels.
Shout out to when Mallory, the Babysitters Club, went to boarding school. That was a great couple of books for me. Great job, Mallory. Yeah. Really set me on this journey.
It is
That's
7:46.
Okay, great. I want to do us a quick. I want to make sure you have time to ask your question. Do you feel okay about doing that now, or do you want to pick a
I think we
favorite?
could do the last one.
Let's do that last one.
Yeah. What do you want readers accomplished to leave the book with? Like after they close that last page?
I mean, presumably I want them to go out and buy a second copy.
Buy for a friend.
So that's step one. No, I think there's like a couple of things that one, if you're looking at like the overall themes, I want to get across the idea that like it's okay to make mistakes. And that, like, the people who love you will still love you and allow you to learn. Like, you still have to learn and grow from those mistakes, but, like, it's okay to fail. It's okay to not be perfect all the time. It's okay to open up to other people and to show other people your weakness. Even people who you're, like, supposed to be strong for, you're allowed to, like, show your vulnerability sometimes, because that's so much an important part of, like, being a person.
What?
I know, we'll talk about this later.
We'll talk about this later.
I need to read the book again.
But not you. Don't worry. You don't be vulnerable for anybody. But the other thing that is really important to me in this sort of like young adult romance rom-com space, it's we all know the world is terrible. Yeah, we've all seen the global pandemic, etc. We all remember that. And I often like to think about like why there's importance in writing like these happy books. Although we've talked a lot about like the emotional trauma, this is still ultimately it's a happy ending book. It's funny, it's pacey, like it's light. There's kissing, there's boys, there's like jokes. As I mentioned, Charlie Bigley, the frat boy, he's there and he's great. And it can sometimes be hard to like when the world is sort of crumbling around you to push forward on doing something that seems inconsequential sometimes. But I think a lot about Meg Cabot again. It always comes back to Meg Cabot.
Always comes back to Meg.
Meg Cabot and Jonas Brothers.
Those are my two. And in one of the later Princess Diaries books, Mia, the main character of those books, she's a writer and she's writing romance. And her boyfriend, Michael, shout out to Michael, another nice boy, he is going to medical school and he's like created this like robot that can do open heart surgery without surgery. I don't understand really how that works. But
Straight up wild.
Yeah. Wow. He like innovated surgery. It's fine.
Sure.
But she's like, what do I have to contribute? But then she starts to think about like, yes, what Michael's doing is like, he can be saving someone's life. But like, when the family's in the waiting room, I can give them a book that makes them happy.
Whoa.
And that's just, I think escapism is so important. It was so important to me over the last few years. And if I can give people like
We're so close.
No, don't hug me. That was
Do not perceive me.
If I can give people a few hours of just escapism and being happy and like getting a happy ending in a world that does not always provide them, for me that's everything. So I want you to feel things and also like laugh
And buy
but yes, also buy. Yes.
That's a real takeaway. Well, thank you. I mean, we got so close that you cried.
I just have a stick.
You know what's not going to give you 69 is questions from the audience. I think we have time for a couple, and then we'll do signing. So
Yes, I do know we have some people who are watching virtually, so I don't know if anyone's watching.
Oh,
the
yeah, good point,
questions
good point.
there, see if anyone has.
thank you to everyone watching virtually. What would you?
Eileen is checking on
Cool.
Great job,
Hi
Eileen.
to our virtual audience. I know my grandpa and my dad are both watching there, so hello.
Joan also said hello earlier.
Oh, hello, hi, Joe.
I think we should have sounded more enthusiastic than my dad and my grandpa.
I got your grandpa's name, so
Papa.
Pop. Hi, Pop. Dr. Mr. America.
Dr. Chef, Mr. America, Bill Quain, the man, the myth, the legend.
But while we're waiting for online questions, we can definitely start.
Yeah, we'll do some audience questions first. Would anyone like to be first?
No one wants that, but who
Or
will?
ask
ask
the
the question.
I phrased that poorly. No, back.
It sounds like you paged Darcy down a little. Can you talk about why you decided to do that?
Yeah, I did.
Can you repeat it for
Yes, so for those watching online / those of you who may be in the front, I aged Darcy down a little bit and why I made that choice. And I did, yes, good eye. Partially just because when you're dealing with the sort of age of things happening in a contemporary setting versus the age of things happening in a Regency setting, you're dealing with different rules. One, like in every Regency setting thing, the men are about 10 years older than the women, just sort of as a rule, like around there. They're usually on the older side. So like Lizzie in the original is probably she's like 23. And Darcy's like late 20s, something like that. So you're dealing with those age differences in the book that I didn't want to address here because those things are weird sometimes. And I wanted them to be close enough they were raised as siblings. That was important to me. And again, like in a contemporary setting, in the Regency setting, as he became an adult, like sure he went to school, but his career is being rich and the landowner, so he's still at home and like raising Georgiana in a way that wouldn't have worked as well in a contemporary setting. So I just wanted to bring them a little closer together. I wanted to bring Georgie up a little bit. Because
she's not like 14.
Right, she's about 14 while this is happening to her. So we bring her up. Fitz is 20 in this. It's also taking place during his sophomore year of college. And also then you get to put him and the rest of like the Pride and Prejudice OG gang in a college setting, which is kind of fun. Like I just enjoyed that. So yeah, that was the main reason, was to sort of I think it still translates the intent into the modern version. Just that if Darcy was 28 in this, it'd be the paternal instinct would not be as weird as it is when he's like her brother and he's like, you know,
trying to step into
that role that he's not really meant to be filling yet. Good question. I forgot.
Yeah.
And another question
How
could
old
also be
is
good.
Georgie's?
16.
16. Okay.
16.
I couldn't remember.
Yes,
More fun. If you could spend a day with somebody from Accomplished, which character would it be?
Oh, that's a good question.
If she could spend a day with anyone in Accomplished, who
yeah.
would it be?
Oh, I don't know. This is challenging. I mean, Fitz could take me somewhere really nice.
Yeah. Fitz has got those connects.
Yeah, the Darcy's have like 40 houses, so that I mean,
Jen.
yeah, Jen the waitress. I don't know. It honestly, it might be Fitz. I love a quiet boy. Yeah.
I can make it work.
Yeah, like I think the combination of like me really loving him and that character, and also I think Fitz is the best connect to like take me on a whirlwind global like hot air balloon ride in a 24-hour period is the combination for that.
Mine's Lizzie.
Lizzie's good.
Lizzie and I would get along like a house on fire.
You really would. Lizzie was really fun to mess with in this. Like I think she's still true to the books, but I won't say what I did because I don't want to spoil anything, but I do change one small detail at the end to give Lizzie just like a little extra boost of agency that she definitely could have had in the original if she wanted it, like circumstantially, but she's allowed to have here, and I really love giving her that extra punch. So when you get there, you'll see
She
it.
was so fun. She was like the perfect amount of her. It's like a seasoning, you know.
Right,
Because
yeah.
you have too much
If
right
you put
now.
too much Lizzie in here, the book becomes Lizzie. She's such a strong character. But yeah, I just love her. She has a line where she's like, "Me and my new boyfriend, the charcuterie board, are gonna go be alone now."
Iconic.
Yeah.
So good.
I think, did your sister have a question?
Oh, you mean the stranger?
I'm sorry,
Is your face?
I meant the strange person, yes.
Hi, Amanda. Great job.
I
Big fan.
How much of the Sage Hall universe did you build out, and how much of that fanfic did you actually write, and can I read it?
Yeah, so Sage Hall we haven't mentioned yet. Sage Hall is, we'll tell a quick funny story about the name after I explain what it is. So Sage Hall is the in-universe sort of Downton Abbey-esque show that Georgie is obsessed with. She writes fanfic. She's a big member of like Tumblr. Thank God, everyone. Tumblr still is a thing. It's wild, but it's still here. Teens are still using it. And so she writes Sage Hall like as a fanfic as a way to like navigate the way through her own life. The quick funny story about that is that I wrote Sage Hall. I was just like, what's like a formal sounding name for things? Sage Hall, great. And we wrote it, and I published the book. And I sent ARCs out, and I have a friend, Courtney Stevenson, if you're watching, Courtney, hello, who works in publishing as well. And she had been a real early advocate for me on sort of my querying journey and then my submission journey. So I sent her an ARC once we had those that she could read it. And she's like, oh my gosh, Sage Hall, like at Cornell, so funny. Sage Hall is the name of the church on my college campus that I got married at. Literally until Courtney said that, I had no idea. Shout out to Courtney. Just nothing at all. You were thinking of other things that day. Right. It was a busy day.
It was a busy day.
You got the Cornell is just so deep in there that you.
It's so deep in there.
I love it.
That's the hilarious part of Sage Hall. But sort of the more plot reason why for Sage Hall is because I really liked the idea that Georgie was working out her feelings through fanfic, and I kind of got inspired by that a little bit for my own life. Because the first novel, I use novel loosely, it was a finished manuscript of words.
There you go.
That I wrote sophomore year of college for National Novel Writing Month. I wrote it in a month, and then Carly read it, and she's reading it. She's like, and it was a fantasy love story situation,
As one does.
as one does. And she was like, hey, Nathaniel was the love interest in here. She's like, is this Dustin? And this is before Dustin and I were dating, so I was like, no, of course, Dustin, my friend, Dustin. Of course not, Dustin.
I resemble that information.
Carly was like, no, you literally wrote Dustin as a love interest in this book. I was like, oh my God, do I like Dustin? Yes, and I love that that's how we how I realized I had a crush on Dustin. And so I wanted to give that to Georgie a little bit. She works out her feelings towards Avery, her eventual love, and just sort of as their relationship develops, her fanfiction develops to sort of take in more of an Avery flavor. And that's just such a fun fact.
Flavory.
A flavory.
That was nice.
Yeah, so there is no further Sage Hall fanfic, I'm sorry to say. It's just exists here. But if you listen to the audiobook, the fanfic is read in an RP British accent. So I haven't gotten to that part in the audiobook yet, but they asked me, they're like, do you want the fanfic in RP? I was like, oh, yes. I've never learned anything more. I had no idea. RP is the very formal British English.
Hello.
Yes. Yes. I won't do it because I'm trying to be professional.
Yes.
Hey, hello, I'm British.
How accomplished.
Hey, I'm a Darcy, yes. I'm very good at accents.
Amanda, good at accents, Quain.
That's what says in the bio in the back. Under the pictures.
Yeah, I had to text your mom about the fishing thing because it wasn't in your bio. You should certainly include that. I always want to call it fly fishing, and it never is.
It's never fly fishing.
Yeah, I was like, I know
Fly
it's not
fishing.
fly fishing.
I'm a world champion DC fisher.
Thank you. My God. Thank you, Jeannie, for
I was born on land.
I'm born in the
I was
sea.
born on the sea. Are there any other questions? Because we can banter through it.
Or online.
Or is there any online?
If there's not, I don't pressure the online.
Yeah.
There aren't any online questions, but Janet Otten says, yay, Amanda and OMP.
Yeah,
Yay.
Yay,
Woohoo!
Thank you. Andrew, do you have a question?
Yeah, so
Excuse me, people straight to the
so you talked a little bit about the way you sort of filled out Georgie's personality for the purposes of this book, and how a lot of that was kind of through the lens of what it would be like to move through the world as a female Darcy.
Yeah.
What was that process like? Because everybody else kind of has a base personality, but
Right.
with Georgie you kind of have to speculate a little bit further. So what was that process like for building her character out?
That's such a good question that if I had a better answer to it, Nikki sounds so literary and smart. And the real thing is that honestly, I think the reason why this book was so easy for me to write is that Georgie was just in here. Whenever Darcy energy got unlocked inside of me, is this sassy 16-year-old girl. So, for example, the first line of the book, "My big brother, Fitzwilliam Darcy, could suck it," is the first line I typed into a Word document when I first sat down to like even begin to think of this. Like that line has not changed. And let me tell you, people here can tell you, I am not usually good at getting openings right the first time. I usually trash like 10 to 15,000 words of various openings before I find my way to it. But this has been the exact opening scene. I think it's just because Georgie's voice just was there. She just kind of like I didn't really think about it. It just sort of happened that way, which makes me sound less like a writer, more like a psychic, which is like not really my vibe.
There are those kind of authors where
Yeah.
I channel the characters.
Yeah, and I'm like, no, this is fiction, but like, I think because I was very well set up for it by having spent so much time in Hey Darcy, like, and looking at even though that was a period piece, it was very contemporarily told, and so like I spent so much time thinking about a contemporary Darcy voice that like to just make it 16 was very simple. Yes, Sarah.
Is there another Austen novel that you would like to adapt?
Shocking. I wonder.
Well, I do have another one. That is coming out next year. And so that one is a retelling of Northanger Abbey, which we're very excited about. It was funny. This one like came very naturally, and then for that book, it was very much like, okay, like I want to write another Austen. Well, there's only 6 Austens.
Yes, there's so many.
And frankly, I only have things to say about so many of them.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm gonna write the
Lady
Susan.
Susan.
And so, but I really enjoyed Northanger Abbey growing up. Well, actually, but growing up, in college, I hadn't really read it as a teen, but in college, I took a class with Carly that was just called Jane Austen, and we just read every single Jane Austen novel, and for each new book, they brought in a new professor for like that 9-week period who like specialized in that type of. It was awesome. So like for Northanger Abbey, they brought in like a professor of Gothic literature who like could explain the various references and like how
That's cool.
that's like Northanger Abbey is like more of a spoof or a satire than like a traditional. It's still a novel, but like it has that satirical elements very much baked into it. And so plus around the same time that I was looking to do a new thing, I watched Never Have I Ever, which is an amazing Netflix show, a vindicating project, and it's about a young girl who's going through the grief of losing her father, and her relationship with her mother, who was sort of the not fun parent who's kind of left behind. And when we got to the end of the show, and I won't spoil it, sort of broad strokes things, I was talking to Dustin, my husband, and he was very much like, oh, it's sort of at the end, there's sort of the grief sort of boils over, and Dustin's like, oh my god, the mom was so terrible in this, I can't believe she wasn't there for her daughter when she needed her, and I was like, but the mom's a person too, and the mom also was going through this grief, and so then I wrote a book to prove Dustin was wrong.
And that, my friends, is true love.
Thank you, Dustin.
Thank you, Dustin, for that. But yeah, so Northanger Abbey is coming out next year. I'm very excited for that. That is it's similar to this in a lot of ways, but it's also like it's more romantic. I think the romance is more essential to, which is really fun to write. And it's gender swap, so it's Hattie Tilney is the main character. He's the Henry Tilney equivalent, and then she hates ghosts. And she goes to Northanger Abbey, American Most Haunted High School.
Of course.
Naturally. And
Is it a boarding school?
Of course it's a boarding
Of
school.
course
The Amanda Quain Pemberley Cinematic Universe consists only of boarding
Oh,
schools.
Originals only.
Yeah. And she's paired up to be the new student ambassador to Kit Moreland because they're on ghost hunting scholarship. Just regular. This is boarding schools. There's no rules there.
There is weirder stuff at boarding school.
So that's obviously my next one. I'd love to adapt more Austen than that. Sense and Sensibility is probably my favorite Austen, and I always
Actually, it's the first one.
that was the
we
first
did.
project we ever did. It never really got off the ground. We wrote a lot of it, but we tried to make Sense and Sensibility into a web series called Dose of Dashwood. Which is still a great title.
It is.
Where it was like a vlog style thing, like Lizzie Bennet Diaries, where I was Marianne and you were Eleanor.
Yeah.
We'll look for that in 2025, I guess.
Real old Eleanor Mary.
I love it. I'm going to do the opposite journey of accomplish.
Yeah.
So I'd love to dig into that somehow. I'd always sort of thought that I never wanted to touch that book, so I thought it was perfect, but we'll see. And then there's Austen's got a lot of like bits and bobs, and I think the more I sort of am immersed in this world via like sneaking in through Accomplished, the more interesting things that exist in it. So.
And if you want more books,
Yeah, you have to keep
Amanda
buying
Quain,
this one.
Yeah.
you should buy multiple copies of Accomplished.
For your friends, your
And
family, your
As
enemies.
I always say, anything's a stocking stuffer if you believe in yourself.
This would absolutely fit in a
Well,
should.
yeah,
Oh,
excited.
Rosie has a question.
Oh,
There
Rosie has
is a comment from
Okay.
Facebook, which is from Miriam Miller. I just wanted to say congratulations on your book launch day and wish you all the best.
Thank you.
Thank you. Miriam has bought the book, so great job, Miriam.
Yeah.
And great job, all of you. Thank you all for being here.
Yes.
Thank you for writing this book. Oh, I'm so sorry. What were you
No,
gonna
no,
say?
no. Well, you. So, it's really weird not being the one in charge of this.
Yeah.
All
Do you want to do the post spiel or?
No, I should. Do I want to?
right.
Yes, but I'll,
It's your day.
no, I'm gonna put my fascinator back on and let you spiel me out. Yes, I
Yes.
will.
Yeah.
So yes, if I don't know how many of you picked up your copy of the book already, but if you did, I would love for everyone who has one to hold it up, and then I'll take a picture of you. If you don't have with you, I know you bought it. It's fine.
We totally do that.
Yeah.
You want to stand on the thing?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, but then we'll flip it. Okay, we'll do that first, then I'll like force the way.
You're all doing amazing. Justin, would you kindly remove the post-it from the front of your book?
The one that says mom and dad.
Thank you, Justin.
Everybody say Georgie.
Georgie.
And then stay.
No idea what I'm. Hold on. Let
You're
me.
doing great.
And then you two lean into.
Stand on my chair.
Yeah, actually I do.
Okay, good. I mean, it's unsafe, but it's.
Listen, I got hands on the flowers.
I'm not.
Oh, so not here.
Virginia says she's excited to be watching you also.
Yay!
All right. Here we go.
Got this. You gotta do it again.
Oh God.
You're so pretty.
I'm gonna fall.
Stay, please don't fall, Rosie.
Thank you.
Yay.
And then yes, we got it. Do you need help? Yes, I do. All of the chairs still really well. So I'll let Lily do the official spiel because I'm
Speed is better.
or speeds, either one. I know Billy for the
But
hours.
not you.
But if you guys do come up to sign, or even if you had picked up a book that was already signed up, I have my copy here, and I would love for everyone who's here to sign it. Yes, I'm very cute. Since when you come up, like I said, even if you need to get a book later or whatever, just give this a quick sign, and that way I can keep it in and then auction it off.
And we will be fetching pens for everyone to do
Yes,
that.
but now you may spiel.
Excellent. All right, spiel.
Spill me away.
So, what we are going to do, we are going to stand up in just a second. We are going to fold our chairs, put them against something flat that is not a human being. Preferably a shelf, but, you know.
Also not a door.
Also not a door. We can handle anything else. Our Patreon members, if you have books that you need to get signed, can come start that line once the chairs are clear. And then those of you who need to get books signed will line up behind, and we will boogie on in.
Yes, and we also have books for sale, obviously, and there are also some Robert Kingsbury, beloved Arlington chocolatier, made custom accomplished chocolate bars that are for sale at the counter. So if you want to commemorate this with delicious chocolate, it's super good.
And it's like not available, like he doesn't sell this flavor to anyone else, so it is specifically for this night Porter's book.
Wow.
Yes. Now you may finish whatever.
Yes, I was just gonna finish by saying thank you so much, Amanda Quain, for writing this.
Thank you.